Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today for the first of the three-part speaker series. We are zooming in from Nagajuanang, also known as Peterborough. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Michi-Saagiig Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor these teachings. This event will be recorded, and please direct any questions you have to the chat. My name is Ethel. I use she, they pronouns, and I will be one of the co-hosts for today's event.
Thanks, Ethel. Let us keep in mind our land acknowledgement as we consider today's focal discussion topic, sustainable equity. Sustainable equity is an active striving for justice, both between members of the present generation and between generations past and present. To give a little insight on the Changing Lives One Speaker at a Time series, each discussion will be focused on one of the three learning communities within Otonabee College. These include sustainable equity, holistic wellness, and scientific and technological innovation. My name is Andreana, my pronouns are she, her, and I will be one of your co-hosts today.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Elijah and I use he and pronouns. And I am very excited to introduce Charmaine, who is a community activist, business owner, mother and grandmother, and chairperson of the Community Race Relations Committee of Peterborough. After Charmaine completed her undergraduate degree at the University of Sudbury, she moved to Zimbabwe for several years before returning to Canada. She came to Peterborough in 2004 and has become a well-known and highly revered member of the Peterborough community. She's been actively engaged with organizations such as Black Lives Matter, Jamaican self-help, and community race relations. And she has a multitude of other interests, anywhere from playing violin with the community orchestra to modeling and acting with Strut Central. In 2017, Charmaine was rated as one of the top 20 most influential persons in Peterborough and received the YMCA Peace Medal. Most recently, in 2020, Charmaine was named the Woman of Influence for Peterborough. She also has been active in planning events ranging from BLM rallies, Black History Month, Just Relax Peterborough, Asian Heritage Month, Indigenous Heritage Month, and International Day for the Elimination of Racism. Without further ado, we welcome Charmaine. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you so much for having me as one of the first speakers for this series. It's so great to be here. I go by she, her, just to let you know. And like you said, I've been in Peterborough since 2004. I moved from Sudbury, Ontario, Northern Ontario, to come and raise my family. And along the way, I've become very active in the community, as was spoken about in my bio, per se. Yeah, so you could say that my journey into Black empowerment led me into the role of social activism, where I co-founded the Black Lives Matter starting in 2014. And that just stemmed from what was happening in the States. But Black violence against Black bodies is just not limited to what happens in the US. But Black Lives Matter had started from the US, from Trey Martin, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But his violent death by one of the neighbors in Florida. And then here in Peterborough, we had our first Black Lives Matter. It was actually in December of 2014. We had our first Black Lives Matter rally, and that was due to the Eric Gardner situation, a Black man who was basically murdered on the streets of New York, or in the States. I'm not sure if it was New York, sorry about that, but where he was trying to make a living selling, he was selling CDs in front of a store, and the police officer, almost the same kind of death as George Floyd, was killed on the streets of in the States. And from there, we've done numerous, every year, we did a Black Lives Matter rally in Peterborough to talk about the importance of Black lives and the struggle that us as Black people have here as far as the violence towards our Black bodies and definitely criminalization, increased proportion of Blacks and Brown, not just Black people, but Indigenous people, high proportion of us being brutalized by police and having a high proportion uh, in our court systems, criminal systems. So there's a lot of injustice in there that's happening with Black and Brown people as far as the crime, criminalization of our justice system. Um, and also been involved, of course, in the campus as far as with one of the professors there is Nadine Changefoot, who put together a group of women here in Peterborough for aging vitalities. And we did, we put together a little documentary, each of us, about who we are as a person. And that is out in the open as far as if anybody wants to see it, they can see my presentation and the other women that participated in it. So I've been involved in those sense, different things in the community. The last one is the forming of Zingha, which is a social business, and it talks about we sell wearable art, but it's also a form of self-education for those people who want to learn more about anti-Black racism and also self-education as to how to become an ally, especially what had happened with the George Floyd situation. Being the chairperson of community race relations, there was a lot of people in the community asking how could they become a better ally, what could be done. And so from there, we thought of Zingha, which is a business that has, I'm actually wearing the shirt right now, zingha.ca, which talks about wearable African art, but also there is a section, if you go on our website, it says self-education, and you just have to click there. It talks about Zingha, who she was back in the 17th centuries, powerful Black African queen that was dating Africa back before colonization. And she was a peacekeeper. She was a decolonizer. She prevented her people from being put in slavery. She was a warrior. She went out to battle and fought just like the men did. And she was also very educated, intellect. She knew how to read and write fluent Portuguese. In fact, you could find her writings now in some of the museums in Portugal. So she was this, she was before her time. She became queen when at that time in their society, there was no such thing as a queen. And she just said, you know what? After the king died, she just said, I'm the queen. And they said, there's no such thing as a queen. And she said, now there is. And she was queen for 40 years. So she was a woman before her time. And so that's the name of our business. And if you go on there, there's a section, like I said, about self-education, how to be an ally, and how to learn more about how to be anti-racist, because it's not enough to say you're not racist, but you have to be anti-racist. So, and just to put it out there, I'm also a student at Trent doing my master's in sustainability. And yeah, so that's definitely my thesis question is, what is the role of Black aging womanists who are leaders in their field, in them dismantling systemic anti-Black racism in the Canadian institution? So that's, yeah. So that's it in a nutshell. I don't know if I know there was a few questions and stuff like that. So
Thank you so much. I'm going to put the link to your website in the chat. Can you tell
okay.
me again what the link was?
Oh, you could just well, it's Zingha. Could you see it? Zingha, Zingha
Yeah.
.ca.
Okay.
You
Perfect.
know, never do product placement, right?
Definitely. Thank you so much for telling us about all that. I love the story about the queen. She sounds amazing. To get started with our question list, you touched a little bit about this before, but given your involvement with all these like amazing organizations, what drives you to dedicate yourself to them and all their causes?
Okay, so yes, I did see that question, and I thought one of the big things for myself personally is my faith. I'm a Christian, and I really rely on that as far as justice is concerned. And I know within the Christian faith, especially with the Christian church, there's been a lot of things that they've done a lot of injustice, especially when it comes to colonization. So um, there's a lot of bad with that connection to the Christian faith per se. But if you're, for me, when I think about my Christian faith, I look at the founder, which is Jesus. And he was a radical person. If you ever just look at what he's done, and he was 100% for justice, for people who are marginalized, for people who were considered others in their community at the time. So that's where that's one of the reasons why I feel very passionate about equity. He was all about equity, and I feel that at one of our rallies, our Black Lives Matter rallies, we had somebody who had a sign that says uh, "Jesus for Black Lives Matter" or something to that effect, and I really could identify that Jesus would definitely be a type of person who would be for Black Lives Matter, because Black people are deemed have been demonized for too long in our society. And we need to have more equity, more of being at the table, that we're not at the table right now. We're like getting just the crumbs. And I believe that equity should be just um, ingrained, but it's not. We're not there yet. And yeah, so my faith is what motivates me to continue this work, and my love for people continues me to continue doing this work, is really important. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Yes. Thank you so much.
Hmm.
Our next question for you is what do you think are the most important qualities in a leader given the times we find ourselves in? And who are some leaders you look up to if you're um, willing to share?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Uh, the quality in leadership, definitely teamwork. And with teamwork requires listening skills, being patient, and not having your own agenda. That's really, really important. You also have to have people are who have your back, who are there to support you, who are there to put you back on track, you could say. So I, for example, have my good friend and business partner Cheryl Edwards, who, if you go on the website, you'll see both of us together. She is an advocate. She's a very strong Black woman, and she has my back. You know, she will remind me of things like, i.e., you know, being grateful for things, my gratitude, the manners, politeness, like, hey, Charmaine, you know, you kind of you weren't very nice in that situation. Or, you know, she just is very gentle. Then I have people of influence would be somebody like my executive director for community race relation, Angela, who, you know, we touch bases, connect. It's very important. Quality of a leadership is to have people who could bring the message forward. And Angela, I I telling you, like as a chairperson of community race relations, it's a volunteer position. Angela is the only paid position. It's really important to have somebody who is able to have a vision for race relation, and she totally does. So what happened is when the job became vacant, I had met Angela like 3 years prior at a race relations conference, and I said, this woman is passionate about anti-racism. And when it became vacant, I approached her and said, hey, we need you. We would love for you to apply. She was living in Toronto at the time. And I didn't know whether or not she'd go for it, considering it was a part-time position. And anyhow, she said yes. And, you know, and she has done an amazing job with CRC, so much so that um, she's in demand in the community. So you you need to connect with people who are going to bring your vision forward, but also I'm in a lot of different things. You also need to have people that could help you succeed. It's really important. I thought of who of the leaders um, that I really kind of like. Definitely who came to mind, of course, is Obama and his wife Michelle, and also um, Jagmeet Singh. I read his book, Love and Courage, and I really recommend you read his book. I'm not, want to pitch a party, but in his book, it really talks about what it is to be a good leader. And that is a leader who operates out of love and not fear. So I'm just, if it's okay with you, could I read a part in the book that I picked out? Okay, so in his book, I'm not sure if you, I'm a political junkie, and so I'm not sure if you saw the clip on this situation that I'm about to read. So if you did, you could visualize the situation, but it was during the campaign for the federal election, and he was at a town hall meeting. It was packed with people, and this is a situation that happened to him. So a woman comes up from the crowd, and her name's Jennifer, and she says, Jennifer kept ranting, we know you're in bed with the Muslim Brotherhood. We know by your votes, she yells, still inching from my face. She uh, disparaged Muslims and me, associated me with Islamic extremists, and said I didn't support women's rights, growing increasingly hostile with each new accusation. I wasn't worried, and this is Jagmeet. I wasn't worried for my safety. Much of my life has been spent disarming aggressive people, and I've gotten pretty good at it. But I was worried that she'd ruined our celebration. So many people on my team have worked countless hours behind the scenes in offices, on doorsteps, but I hadn't had a chance to come to our gathering before that day. They and many of the other supporters in the room deserve better than having their optimism derailed and drowned out by bigotry. I fear they walk away with a bitter taste in their mouth. I knew I had to cool Jennifer down and respond in a way that made the room feel positive again, but the chances of turning around slimmed with every second she seethed. When two campaign volunteers approached Jennifer and tried to shepherd her away, one of them gently touched her back, and Jennifer spun around and snapped at him. Don't touch me, she screamed. Don't anyone touch me, or I will contact the police immediately. Anyhow, then it goes on, and then he says, thanks to my mom, this is Jagmeet. The words finally came to me. What do you believe in? I asked the room. And he says, we believe in love and courage, right? Love and courage. A dear friend of mine who runs a creative agency had helped develop Love and Courage for the campaign, but to me, it was more than just a slogan. When my friends presented the ideal to me, I felt these two terms captured more than just my motivation, more than just my journey. They perfectly encapsulated the life lesson taught me my values, who I am, and the way I try to live my life, love and courage. So for me, I felt that really, for a really good leader, that's to me sums it up. And for him, Jack Meat, love and courage, because you are going to get people who are hostile, who don't understand your message, and you have to be able to know how to deal with that. So, for example, Obama, even Jack Meat saying, Michelle, you could see when they're in the position of leadership, they're very they're people people person, right? They're very calm, they're cool and collect. They're they're able to laugh at themselves, they're able to make jokes, right? They're relaxed. Whereas somebody like Trump, who is totally opposite of that. He preaches or he talks of fear, like he's divisive. He's, you know, yeah, I don't know if you saw the clip where he's like at a rally and he's like, "You suburban housewives, like vote for me. I'm your protector." From those radical lefts, like I don't, they're not going to go into your neighborhood because I'm the man, like macho man sort of mentality kind of thing, and it's all about fear. Whereas Obama and Jack Mead, it's all about out of a place of love, right? And that's, to me, that's a good place. That's a good leader, is out of the place of love. Some people do like that kind of fear mentality. A leader that comes out like, I'm the macho man, I'm in charge, you listen to me, I know what, father knows best. And some people are like, yeah, that's the kind of guy I want to be, you know, or somebody like Obama, who he's more of a team builder. He's more like, hey, what do you think of that? And listening to others and not just, I have my agenda and you guys are going to follow it. I don't care what you think. This is it. And so that's why I really appreciate somebody like Jackmeet Singh, somebody like Obama, and I cannot tolerate anybody who is like a Donald Trump. I just is like goes against the flow, really. Anyhow, I hope that answered your question.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I love at the beginning when you mentioned that part of being a strong leader is having a great support system. That really, I don't know, strung a chord with me.
Uh-oh.
Andriana, you're muted.
Yeah, she's muted.
Classic. Oh my gosh.
It's okay.
Did you hear any of what I just said?
No, that's okay. You could do it again.
Oh man. Okay. So yeah, I just appreciated what you said about like part of being a leader is having a strong support system. I just really liked that you said that. Okay, so this question is for the students. Oh my God. Ooh, okay, I'm fine. This is for the students in the audience. So we would like to know what your experience as a university student yourself was. So maybe speaking more to your undergraduate, but also now as a master's student.
So I'll talk about as a student in general. If you want, I could talk about the past and then move into now. Okay, so I have now and I have the past. So when I was going to school, so I grew up, just a little background as to who I am. My little history is I grew up in an all-white community. I immigrated, even though my last name is Magumbe. I like to just say I'm definitely Zimbabwean. Let's keep it at that. But I was born in Canada. We immigrated from Jamaica. And my family lived in what we call the Junction in Toronto, which is Dundas and Kiel area. And we were the only Black families in that community. even so, I at that when I was growing up, we didn't face overt racism, and it was just a great community. Got along really. But I remember where this is where school comes in. I remember I was in it was a grade two, and my teacher, Mrs. Canberra, or it was grade three actually. Mrs. Canberra, she was just the greatest teacher. I came into that class. I was basically almost going to be repeating grade two, but they pushed me ahead. And so I wasn't a very good at school at that time. But she, Mrs. Canberra, who's a white woman, saw something in me that just brought out the best in me. She was what Martin Luther King practiced of not judging a person by the color of their skin, but their content, and that's what she did. She was able to bring out the best, and at the end of the school year, I was able to go from the worst to the best in the class. And because of that, I was able to learn grade four. All the best kids in the school got to be put in a special class where we were each given an instrument, a string instrument to play, and I was given the violin, and we were put into orchestra. So from we were the string section. Then when we got in grade seven and eight, we met with the flutes, the wind instrument, and we were a full orchestra. By the time we reached seven to eight, we played full orchestra. So that's just a little bit of some people wonder how come I play the violin or love orchestra music, but that's the reason why. But anyhow, so I do love orchestra. Started at a very young age and do love playing the violin. But because I was kind of blindsided with the the racism not being overt when I was growing up. When I went to university, um, I was I was not the systemic racism that's in the post-secondary institution hit me like I was blindsided. Wasn't expecting it. It was definitely over. But you know, when you're in post-secondary institutions, and you're trying to do well, and you're trying to pass, and you're trying to do your placements, right? You do not you know. And honestly, to be truthful, I didn't even label it as racism because I was like kind of like there's no such thing as racism. And then when I talked to somebody else who was in the know, they said, that sounds a bit racist, Charmaine. I'm like, really? Do you think so? Anyhow, to make a long story short, I did graduate. It was at Laurentian. But it wasn't in my professional program that I wanted. I graduated, I got a degree in psychology, but that's not what I really wanted to get in the long run. Um, I wanted another type of degree. So that is when you find racism in post-secondary institution as a student, it's really hard to navigate that system because sometimes you don't know how to articulate that, and sometimes you don't know, is it that you're just a really bad student or is it that the teacher is racist against you, right? So to decipher, and as a person who is white, they never have to think about whether or not is it because you're white that you're doing poorly, but as a person who is racialized, it does cross your mind. Well, for me, until now, it didn't cross my mind. But yeah, so that's a bit of the past. Now I'm in Masters of Sustainability, and I'm just loving the program. I think it's so great. We had a panel discussion just yesterday where we're talking about it was our restoration story. How do we get into the mess, and how could we get out of the mess that we're in? So our panel discussion was, we were talking, my partner in the panel, she was talking about Indigenous struggles as far as the racism that they face, and um, the history of the residential schools, and I was talking about anti-Black racism. And then we went to, okay, let's talk about this. and there was a quietness. Whereas the previous panel, they were talking about sustainability, the environment, that there was more of a conversation. You know, people were like, yeah, I want to talk about this. But with racism, people are mute, and it's a very uncomfortable conversation to have, because people don't know sometimes what to say, how to say what they need to say. So they just rather be quiet, um, because it also is very uncomfortable. So having said that, I am going to read to you um, my my restoration story that was submitted, that I handed in for the prior to the panel discussion. We had to write a restoration story. So this is a part that I read out to the class um, during the panel discussion. So I'll just, if that's okay, I could read it. Yeah. Okay. Just 1 minute. Satis, can you do me a favor? Could you get your charger? My phone is, yeah, my phone is dying. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so here it is. My feeling of disappointment, inadequacy, and failure when confronting the monster of systemic racism made me realize that anti-Black racism was alive and well in our Canadian education system. A CTV News reported that in their 5 charts that show what systemic racism looks like in Canada, that the expectation for higher education was that 94% of Black youth aged 15 to 24 said that they would like to get a bachelor degree or higher, but only 60% thought they could, according to the data from 2016. This gap between hope and expectation doesn't exist for the rest of the population, where 82% of other groups surveyed said that they wanted to achieve a university education, and 79% believed they could. These statistics are concerning and demonstrate that not enough is being done in dismantling anti-Black racism in our society. This virus of racism is a hidden fiber that is intertwined into the fabric of our society, where racial inequalities are clothed into our institution, such as our education system. We Canadians need to do better in achieving racial injustice for all. How can we accomplish this goal of reducing racial inequalities? To fully address this posed question, we need to seriously look at what systemic racism looks like in Canada, to adequately find solution to the issues of racial injustice. The the COVID has unmasked the pain of racism in our world with the execution of George Floyd, symbolizing the violence of hatred of racism towards Black. His death was a catalyst called for us, Blacks, racialized and non-racialized, to take action. And there were many BLM rallies occurred around the world, even in our 96% all-white population, Peterborough being no different. We had our own BLM rally in 2020 with the highest number of participants since the conception of BLM rallies in Kawartha. These movements demonstrate wide support in ideals that's represented by our UN Deputy Secretary General, Amin Mohammed, who says, "We cannot afford to go back to the world we had before this crisis. That means leaving unaddressed the vulnerabilities and fragility that this crisis has brought into plain sight." So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. It does. Thank you. So our next question is about your work, and what does your work mean to you personally?
Okay, I just have to look at my notes. So yes, of course. So my work, so just to let you know, my work it's a 24/7, right? Work is a passion. Whatever you do is a passion. So technically, my professional job is I'm a international student advisor. That is my profession. As an international student advisor, I'm very passionate about what I do. So with my job there, it is not a 9 to 5. Um, when I like to say when I'm an international student advisor, it's all about the students, right? It's all about getting to know who they are and getting to make them feel like they belong in the community, in their institution, and in our society. So, and it's the same way as working in community race relations. It's a passion. It's making people feel like they belong. That equity is for everyone. So um, work uh, is a living, breathing, right? It is like finding out about a book about anti-racism and saying, "Hey, I'm going to read that book on my spare time." It's it doesn't stop when you're not getting paid. This position is unpaid. My international student advisor is a paid position, but I do not, even with international student, my students, they could contact me via email and I will reply to them. Um, I don't know if this is, but they could call me, like they could and say, "Hey, I'm going through a hard time," right? Um, so it's it's your passion and you need to find what your passions are and make that. I got into international student advisor very late in life, but I love that job, and it's something that uh I love doing because it's like that job was made for me. Like, like welcoming students into the community and in the faculty, and uh, because they're coming in as racialized students, of course, most of them. um, they do talk about um, the post-secondary racism that they face, and I totally understand that, and I totally get that. So um yeah, work is 24/7. It's a mind frame. It's like it's just a part of you and who you are, that it's your identity, you know. It really, yeah, I'm just passionate about anti-racism and especially helping students feel like they're at home. That's really important. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Charmaine. Those are really good points, and it's really important to remember that this work is not just a book. It's not something you can do on the weekend or at 5 o'clock, but a 24/7 life commitment towards fighting for your people and your community. So thank you so much for that. Our last question for you today is, with everything that you've shared with us and all your points, I also really loved your message about love and working through love. I think that's super important, especially when you mentioned sustainability. I think
Hmm.
it's important to remember and reiterate that Black Lives Matter is an act of sustainability. So for you to bring that up really put things together. And so, with all that, our last question is, what achievement are you most proud of? If there's one that you can pick. I know there's a lot that you have done.
So I thought that was a trick question. It's like, if you're are married or something, it's like who was your, you know, kind of like who was uh, your best boyfriend or something. You'd have to say it's your husband. You default your husband. So, of course, what's a great achievement? You would say, I have 5 kids. It's my kids, right? It's like a no-brainer. My kids are my greatest achievement that I'm proud of. By sure, I didn't just say that because you have to, because I'm a mom of 5, a grandmother of 3, but it's by far more the children. So I was very, very fortunate that I had the opportunity. I'm born Jamaican, came here when I was 4 to Canada, met my husband at Laurentian. So I got my MRS. Do you know what that is? That's so funny because when I was in first year university, the economic teacher said that to me and my friend. He's here. Oh, some women are just here to get their MRS, and my friend and I were like, "Oh, what is that? Master in Religious Studies?" It was like to put the ring on your finger, right? So I did just so by chance happened that I did get my MRS. So I got married, met my husband. He's from Zimbabwe. Met him, got married, and he was actually an international student. But he told me right from the get go, he said, I'm not interested in staying here and being Canadian. I'm going back home to Zimbabwe after I graduate, which is exactly what we did. He graduated and we went to Zimbabwe to live there as a family. And so we spent 7 years in Zimbabwe, and I was it just was the greatest thing ever. At the time, we went from 92 to 99. So it was really good times in Zimbabwe at that time. There was peace. It was livable. It was just so good to that I had that good experience of Africa, of Zimbabwe. And being there also gave me the opportunity to see how Zimbabweans raise their children, and which is totally kind of different from here. I don't know if anyone's from an African country, but it is different. And I just like this was something that I said, yes, this is great, right? Just it's things like, for example, I um, this is Zimbabwe, and I've spoken to other people from other African countries like Nigeria and things like that. For example, breastfeeding minimum, they breastfeed to minimum 2 years. And so it's a totally breastfeeding culture. You see breastfeeding quite anywhere you go, and they don't hide their breasts. There's no such thing as a little towel to cover your breast. The women's are there, they whip their breast out and feed the baby. And you could be in a meeting and the woman is just like, this is her breast and she's feeding baby, and there's men there and no one says like, oh my god, there's a woman's breast, get it away. It's just normal, right? And then the whole concept of I baboo my babies, which is like babooing is a Shona word, and it means to carry your baby. So when my little one was like 7 months, and my first month in Zimbabwe, she said baboo, and I'm like, oh, she said Bible because I'm a Christian, and I go, and then my relative was there, and she said, oh no, she said baboo, baboo, that's not Bible. And it means baboo means she wants to be picked up and put on the back, right? So that's what I did. And which is my two older girls now, they have their own children, and they had them here in Canada, of course, but they baboo their babies now. I showed them how to do it, and they baboo their babies, and it's just the greatest thing. I don't know, like I said, if I might be speaking to a very small crowd of people who know what this is, but so I used to, and they wear their babies a lot. Like the babies, as far as babies are concerned, their babies are. I'm going to recommend. You can put this in the Google, but you must watch Netflix. The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. That is that shows authentic African. Um, the way that mother, if you when you watch it, maybe throughout the way that mother has that baby throughout the movie, that is a Zimbabwean woman. That is the way that they have their babies. They hold their babies, they baboo their babies. That baby doesn't go in a high chair. Their baby sits on your lap when you're free. You give the baby, right? Oh, I could go on about this, but anyhow, I should not. I digress, but watch that movie and watch the way the woman holds that baby. The baby is there. The baby sleeps with them. Oh, just another little thing about that movie. So when I first went to Zimbabwe, I'm just so excited. When I first went to Zimbabwe, and it was me, my husband, and my baby, because she was 6 months at the time. And we went to the city, Harare, the capital, and they're like, oh, this is your room. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's like a single bed. It was like this, and I'm like, do you realize it's a husband and wife and baby? And they're like, yeah, this is where you're going to sleep, right? And I'm like, oh my God, the bed is so small, right? So I just thought, okay, like, I guess it's a thing. And in that movie, The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, their bed is that small. Like, it's not a very large bed. But then I had read about a African tribe. I don't know what part of Africa it is. And that's how they sleep. They sleep in these small little bed, husband, wife, and kid, and that's how they sleep, right? Anyhow, I digress, you know. Someone has to go to the next meeting. And okay, so that's one of friends. So my children, what could I say? But we're talking about my work. I guess you would have to say definitely by far is a solidarity weekend that happened when there we had a situation here in Peterborough that the white supremacy group was going to have a rally, and we got together as people in the community. We had Desmond Cole came down. He spoke at the rally. We had about 2,000 people that were like, we are going to say no to this white supremacy group here in Peterborough. That was by as far as my work is concerned, yes, besides my 5 children and 3 grandkids, that's another proud moment. So you could, yeah. So I hope that answers your question. I digressed a little bit about my 5 kids and stuff like that, but I just had to put it out there. Yeah. So is there any other questions?
Thanks again. I personally enjoyed your storytelling. So that's the end of our formal questioning. We'd like to open up the floor to the audience to ask any questions that they might have. We'll ask that you, if you feel comfortable, to turn on your camera, and if you prefer to just put your question in the chat. So yeah, you can think of any questions that you might have had. I have a couple follow-up questions for you, Charmaine, if you.
Okay, sure.
So, I'm just thinking which one I should choose. Oh, to go back to a more serious topic, I was wondering, since you said your childhood, up until university was quite sheltered, I guess, against.
Yes, that's a good word.
Against racism. I was wondering, this is just kind of a silly question, would you ever go back to that kind of sheltered impression of what the people are like?
That's a really good question because I live in Peterborough. So, I grew up in an all-white community, and now I live in Peterborough. And I think to a certain degree, on my comfort, I'm very comfortable being in an all-white community. But vice versa is that whites or people who are really truly from Peterborough do not feel that comfortable with being not with being with Black people, but just not feeling as welcome. So I'll give you an example. Most of my white friends that I have here in Peterborough, a lot of them will tell me that when they were growing up, they had a Black friend, right? And so, they're now my friends. So, and opposite is not feeling welcomed in, let's say, in the all-white community. And if those, especially in Peterborough, if they've hadn't had the opportunity to mingle with people of different faith and racialized people, they're not comfortable. They don't know how to sometimes approach you. They don't want to say politically incorrect things, so they rather not talk to you. And so the uncomfortable is when, for example, you're in a group, you're the only racialized person, and they don't talk to you. You're totally invisible. It's like, what's up with that? So they would be like, oh, how was your weekend, Karen? And she's like, oh, yeah, I had this great, fun, wonderful weekend. We did this and that. And I'll come in, and there'll be a group, and I was like, and would have been maybe there for a few months, and I'll be, oh, hi, Karen. And they're like, oh, hi, Charmaine. And then they'll be like, everybody else is like talking about the weekend, but they won't even ask me about my weekend. And I personally, I find that really rude. But, there's that like, oh, she's not even there kind of thing. So in Toronto is a little different. Living in Toronto, you find that people are more, because they're used to mixing with people of different faiths and racialized people, then they tend to include you in the conversation. So it's a bit different than living in something like Peterborough. Not to say that Peterborough isn't welcoming. There has to be something that is still a 96% all white community that's preventing people from fully feeling like they're welcomed. So, and it could be just that I'm able to just like brush it off and say, okay, whatever, right? But some people, they don't like to be excluded from, or they don't like to feel invisible. They don't like to feel being othered. They don't appreciate that. And I think it's because people here, they don't get to mingle with other people. They tend to, all you see is the stereotypes in the media that's negative. And unfortunately, sometimes when you see that, then it's internalized and you think of bad things sometimes. I don't know. When you see, hopefully not, but yeah.
That actually, you answered another question I was going to ask, and that was like, what do you think of the like racism or oppression or like, do you experience? Obviously you do in Peterborough. So yeah, that answers that question. Well, yeah, anyone else have a question? Looks like Joanna has one.
Yeah, I have one, thank you. Charmaine, I really enjoyed hearing your stories of living in Zimbabwe. And I'm just curious about how that felt for you, being a Black child growing up in a predominantly white community, and then all of a sudden going into a Black country where all of a sudden visibly you fit in, but culturally it was still quite different and new. So I'm just curious if you could share a little bit about that.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good question. So they have a term in Zimbabwe, they call them nose brigades. And it basically is Blacks who refuse to speak Shona, which is their language of the country. And so they would come to me and I would totally speak English and they'd be like, oh my goodness, what's her problem? She doesn't want to speak Shona. And then I would have to explain that, okay, I'm Black, but I'm not, and then I have the last name Magumbe. Oh my gosh. So that's another layer on, wow, she really doesn't want, she's like, just faking it here. Like she doesn't even want to speak Shona. And which is really interesting because I ended up, this is really different, but I ended up in an all white Bible study with white farmers. Oh my goodness. And so anyhow, I was the only Black person there, but they were basically born and raised in Zimbabwe. They were white farmers. And I remember one time, because in Zimbabwe, because it's a poor country, when you have a good job, like my husband, now my ex, had he was an engineer, so he had a really good job, and everybody, for the first week, you have people come knocking at your door asking if they could work for you as a domestic and a gardener. And then what happens is you choose one, because every day you'll have someone knocking on the door until you hire someone. And then when you hire someone, they stop. So you have a domestic worker working in your house and you have a gardener. That's just the way it is in Zimbabwe, because you want to provide work for those who don't have the means of the education. And so most people have it, especially if they have a salary income. So we did. Now, when you went into town, of course, the white farmers, they had their domestic workers, but you would always find that their domestic workers would sit in the car with their kids. Like the woman would go shopping, and then the domestic worker would just sit in the car with the kids. Or when she would go to the store, the white farmer or the white person, she would have her nanny with the kids, holding the kids, and you could tell they were nannies because they would have these nanny outfits. So you could tell it's not a friend, she's a nanny, because she has on like a nanny outfit. And so at the Bible study, I said to them one day, I said, what's up with, why do you guys bring your workers with you to when you go grocery shopping? Like, I just was so puzzled. Like, why do you guys do that for? And then, one of them, she got beat red, so mad. She's like red in the face. She said, you never trust your domestic, leave them alone with your kids. Like, what if they give them bleach? And I'm like, wow, like that was just I just the fear of Blacks was so and this is way past the independence war and everything. Anyhow, so they accepted me because I was English speaking, right? But they still didn't accept the Blacks that even worked in their household, and vice versa. The Blacks were fearful of the whites. Wasn't a good situation. But anyways, to make a long story short, with that situation of the domestic worker, I was going somewhere with that. Oh yes, this is where I was going. Can you imagine? So, you're in this Bible study with all white women, farmers, whatever. And so they said, hey, why don't we learn Shauna? Because they were totally English speaking. They didn't know Shauna at all. So what did we do? We got this white guy to come in to teach us Shauna, to give us lessons on how to speak Shauna, which is really funny. But I mean, he was fluent. He was fluent Shauna speaker, right? And so, which really was silly for me because I had all of my husband's family that could have probably been more than willing to teach me Shauna. But anyhow, needless to say, I never learned the language because in Zimbabwe, English, the English is taught from grade 1 all the way up. Everybody spoke English. You could easily go without speaking a word of Shauna, but I took the lessons and I did very poorly. My husband's family would laugh at me. I deem it attempted after that to speak Shauna. But anyhow, so I don't know if that answers your story, but that's, yeah. Okay.
Do we have any other, oh, sorry, go ahead, Charmaine.
Oh, is there any other questions?
You can write in the chat as well if you feel more comfortable doing that.
Can I ask, what's your typical day like? I know you have a variety of different responsibilities with things. So what does a day look like for you?
Okay, that's a really good question. I think one of the questions too was about what I'm working on right now. So yeah, so my day is very crazy because I did start the day. I start with yoga. Really important to get self-care in there. I said that during the virus, what I did do, I had an invisible German Shepherd dog that I took on a walk every day. I don't like dogs, so mine was invisible. So that meant if you have a German Shepherd, you have to take a minimum at least twice a day for at least an hour minimum to 2 hours just to get out in nature, which I did. And then I would talk to my real friend Jesus, and that was very helpful to get through this, to keep real. Another thing I am doing now is I started the day off with yoga this morning, and then did some housekeeping with school, my assignments. I also had a business meeting. I had business meetings for my Zingha. That was for about 2 hours. And then now with this. So, and then there's another session coming up at 5. I don't know if you know about this. I think it went out to all of you about racialized staff and students. And Nadine, I believe, is going to be on that panel. So I love to listen to that. And I will end the day with doing somewhat more assignment work for school that's due tomorrow. I have to get started on that. Don't mum's the word on that. I've been working 2 weeks on this assignment, but yeah. And then I live with my mom, and we live in the same household. So I don't know if you saw her walking by, but I'm her caregiver, so I have to make sure that she is. I'm technically an empty nester. My kids have 18. They moved out, and they're not coming back. I don't know. It's unfortunate. I have those kind of kids that are 18 and went to post-secondary education, and yeah, so they're all out of the house. But my mom, we live together, so I'm my caregiver for her. Yeah, so that's basically Monday. If I have an opportunity, I will watch at the end of the day Netflix. I love Trevor Noah. Love Trevor Noah. He, by the way, just this is between us, but he's my boyfriend, but secret boyfriend. He does not know that. But it's like I'm hoping one day he'll put that ring on my finger, but I don't know. I don't know if that will ever happen. Yeah, so that's it. I tape his shows, and I try to, because I'm tend to be behind. I'll tape it and then I'll watch a couple at a time and try to catch up. I think I have some September ones that I haven't watched, but they're so far behind that I've said no, I need to watch the more recent ones. So I'm watching now the more recent ones. So yeah. So and so the projects that I'm working on. Okay, so I don't know if you know what's been happening with the naming of the new school in Peterborough. They're building a new school up in East City off of Hunter Street. And they wanted to name the school East City Public School, which is really bland. And they went through this process to name a school, la la la. And one of the names that they had was an indigenous name. And they decided not to go with that. And I contacted the Court of Truth and Reconciliation, talked to Alice Williams, and I said, hey, they're going to name this new school EC Public School. They, for whatever reason, they're not wanting to name it this indigenous name. And so we said, okay, we have to do something. So we, my CRRC, the Court of Truth and Reconciliation, we got together and we said, no, we're going to approach the board and say, look, this is something that has to be done with this name. And so they said, okay, you could present your reason for why you think it should be an indigenous name at our board meeting. But before the board meeting started, they said, just to let you know, we went through this rigorous program of naming the school, la, la, la. You could come and talk to us, me and Alice, but it's been decided it's going to be called East City Public School. So we said, okay, whatever. So we made our presentation. And at the end of the presentation, they said, you know what? We're going to reconsider that name. And just recently, I believe in the minutes, I think we're praying that it's going to be Kwate East City Public School. So we're hoping that would be so great. They talk about land acknowledgements in Peterborough, like the city does it, everybody does it, right? It's a thing to do, right? But if you look around Peterborough, there is no indigenous names on any of our buildings, right? So the naming of this school to be indigenous will be a landmark to say that we just not only going to acknowledge you through lip service, but we're going to acknowledge you on our public institutions such as this school. So that's one thing. Another thing that I'm really working hard on is the friggin' bus route thing. It's like, that's just, to me, they cut it from 15 to 9 and now no one takes a bus. And so that's been my pet peeve for the last couple of months. Anyhow, I'm working with somebody to help try to resolve that issue. And BHM, we're planning for Black History Month as well. So I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Congratulations on the naming of the school. That's very
Well,
exciting news.
yeah, we're hoping, they did mention that they did put a motion forward. It hasn't been technically formalized per se, but we're hoping that the next meeting that will be, everybody will accept it. I believe, we're praying that that will be the case. That would be, for us, a big thing. Yes.
Awesome. I have just one last question from myself, and then I'll stop hogging all of the talking space. I was just wondering, about your business. I've always like personally felt uncomfortable wearing art from like other cultures because I don't know. Yeah, it just doesn't feel appropriate. So
Okay.
yeah, can you just talk to that a little bit?
That's an excellent question. And we even had one of our good friends who's in a diversity inclusion. She's a diversity inclusion officer. And she said the same thing you said. And people, a couple of people have said that they don't feel comfortable wearing, like, for example, they feel it's a appropriation of the culture. So what we like to say is that appropriation of the culture would be if you saw our shirts and then you decided that you were going to take that design and put it on make your own t-shirts out of it, and then you start selling it, right? That to me is appropriation. But we feel that by supporting a Black owned business, then that's something that's positive. And also it makes a statement to say, identifying with the Black culture, or being Black positive, you could say, being Black positive. Having said that, oh yes, the majority, because we live in Peterborough, 80% of our clientels are white older women over 45 years old, and they're the ones. I did a delivery the other day of one of our shirts to a customer who bought one and loved it so much she bought a second one, and she came out, it was an older white woman, she must have been maybe over 70, and she came out really proud wearing, it was an African goddess, really proud wearing her shirt and just loving it. And I'm like, yes, like, and even if you go on our website, it is a lot of it's from all different backgrounds. We have biracial, we have East Indian, we have Blacks, we have whites wearing our shirts. And it's funny you say that because on our Etsy, which is internationally based, if you go Afrocentric, we're there, and most of the people that are wearing the Afrocentric shirts, like the other companies, they all have like Black people wearing their shirts, and then ours, our Zingha one, where she's wearing one of our African Afrocentric t-shirts with an African goddess on it. It's this white woman with blonde hair, blue eye on that. But I mean, if you go on our website, we have every nationality, because we believe in inclusivity, and we believe in as far as being anti-Black racism, we believe in equity and being at the table, right? We just want our fair share. We don't want to be like, just only all Black, but everybody that's biracial, that's East Indian, that's my household right now. I have 3 people from India that live with me. So it's a fun time when it's Diwali and stuff like that. It's a great time. Indian music, that's great. Like, so we believe in inclusive, being inclusive. So we would love for you, if you checked out our website, you could see that it's people from all walks of life, and that's what we're all about. Zingha is all about that. Yeah. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. That
Okay.
sparks another question in me, but I'm going to refrain from asking it just to give someone else an opportunity to ask a question if they feel comfortable. And if not, I think we can wrap up. We're like pretty close to our ending time. Does anyone have another question?
I have one.
Okay. Let's go with this. Sorry, let's make this the last question, and we can do our closing comments, just so that everyone's not gone when we do our closing comments.
I just wanted to ask you quickly, did you like always consider yourself a leader, or was there like a moment of change where you kind of realized that like that's what you wanted to do with your life?
No, you know, I'm in my 50s. I'm not, I don't really care about, I mean, if you Google, you probably could find out my age, but I honestly, I think I went back to school, went back to Laurentian when I was older, and then that's when I had the whole, oh my gosh, you know, situation. So I only started when I honestly, I could say when I started to get involved with community race relations, and also having my voice being heard and wanting my story to be out there in the open. That is, you know, and racialized people, they tend not to, um, and this is the thing with racialized people, they're quiet most of the time. If they're in a group, they're not going to be ones to be chiming in to put their 2 cents in, because our society, we don't listen to racialized people, we listen to the white guy, default, the white guy, you know. I remember there was a restaurant, and it was a soccer team. They were from out of town. It was like biracial blacks, a white guy. I think it was mostly all racialized people except for one white guy. And I just went over and said, hey, you know, I guess you guys are here for soccer or something. And I was talking to them, asking questions, and all of the racialized people, and I'm a black woman, none of them would answer my question, but the white guy. And I wasn't even talking to, I was like looking at the, you know, talking, and they were all quiet, and it was a white guy who answered all of my questions, and they were just very mute. They didn't, I don't know if they were just shy, but so now where was I going with that? You had asked me about, just can you repeat it? I'm sorry, over 50.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if there was like a particular point where you found yourself like in the leadership position and were like, this is it.
So so having said that, yes, and so it takes time, right? It takes time to have your voice. Your stories matter. It takes time to be to articulate. I found that I did a lot of articles, wrote a lot of articles in the paper about racism. So that also helped me to say, as race relations, a go-to person in Peterborough. So they, you know, and when we first started with, I shouldn't say community race relations has been around for a while, but we would have like meetings about race relations in Peterborough, and the Checks TV would come, and they would like talk to the white person, and then and so at first it was a default that they would come and just talk to white person. And it's about anti-black racism, and they would, you know, there'd be black people, but and so as a group we saw, like, if Checks TV or the media comes, all white people, they're mute. Like, tell them to go, like, you know, if the black person is comfortable, let them talk too. And so that would be sometimes myself or whoever who was racialized, giving them the opportunity to speak their stories, right? So it's but now, talking about being a leader, yeah, I'm realizing that, like, now I'll go down Peterborough and people will say, hey, hi, Charmaine, and I don't know who they are, like, you know, because I'm in the papers, I'm on the news, so it's, you know, I wish I could make money on that. I don't know. You could buy something from Zingha, maybe. .ca. Yeah, so that's why one of the things I did get into was political. I didn't win, but I don't know, maybe maybe this time around. I don't know if I want to associate myself with a party per se, even though I did mention Jagmeet Singh. I love him. Recommend the book. Also recommend The Skin We're In by Desmond Cole. And also how to be anti-racist. I'm gonna just, it's right here. I had a session, The Skin We're In. Can you see that? By Desmond Cole. And how to be anti-racist. Oops. How to be anti-racist. You can put that in the chat. That's a great book too. Anyhow, those are the most recent ones I've been reading. Yeah, and How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, Kendi. Anyhow.
I wanted to just touch a little bit on what you mentioned about not speaking because of how society is kind of pushed towards only listening to white folks, and it really like hit home, and it made me realize something about myself. So thank you for that, because there's a lot of groups I'm part of, somewhat involved, somewhat not, and I'd hear comments like, "Oh, you're so quiet, but you're also so good at this, but you're so quiet in group meetings," and it's true. We're quiet because we're made to be quiet. So when we're put in situations, if you ask a question, we're going to wait for the person that you're going to listen to talk first. It's this programmed way of life that we have a long way to go in terms of decolonizing and unlearning these habits. So that really helped kind of put all that together. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes, that's so true. And I remember one time I was at work I was working at Fleming. I was laid off, just to let you know, but anyhow, that's whatever. And we were doing something, and it was like all women, like it was an all women group, and there was just like one white guy, and they were like, oh, they had to do something like say Yahoo, okay, like something like that. It was really silly. It wasn't even like he had to give a speech. It was just say Yahoo. And what happened? It was like 10 females, 10 women, and one white guy. Who said the Yahoo? It was everybody pointing to the white guy. I mean, honestly, I thought, oh my gosh, like, why is that? Like, I mean, anyone could say Yahoo, but it was just a default, like you said. It was like the default, go to the white guy. And of course, I don't want to bash white guys. Nothing's wrong with the white guy, but it's like, I don't know if you saw my little shout out about the white guy being hired at New Canadian Center, but that's another story. Do a shout out to that. But anyhow, yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
So I want to say thank you for being here, Charmaine. It's been so great to hear from you and hear your stories and your point of view. We all really appreciate it. We are going to close our session now. So I just want to say, first off, thank you to all of our attendees for attending today. We know there's a lot going on, and we really appreciate your participation. I want to say thank you to Otonabee College and the Impact Program for hosting the event, as well as Black Student Support for helping us moderate. And most importantly, thank you, Charmaine, for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with us.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that you guys chose me. I feel honored that I was first on the list, and I'm looking forward to seeing who else you're going to have on the list.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charmaine.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.